Welcome to another episode of Give It a Nudge. Today we have a super interesting conversation, and we are going to talk about a startup that really celebrates life and how many of them really do that. So I would like to introduce you to Melissa Reeder. Nice to meet you.
Thanks,
and your
Steve.
company, Violet.
Thank you for having me.
So rather than my explanation of it, let's hear your explanation. Tell us what Violet is, and then we'll sort of get into the history a little bit more.
Yeah, so Violet is a virtual care platform for the last stage of life. It's really a whole life stage that we just don't really think about or talk about, and we certainly don't plan for, about the last 12 to 18 months of a person's life.
Yeah.
And Violet is really designed to help with all of the practical, emotional, and in time clinical aspects of that life stage.
There's a lot that happens in that. I've been through this with my parents. There's a lot that happens.
Yeah, well, there's a lot that should happen and could happen. Unfortunately, what we see is that people just do too little too late. And
there's no going back.
No, which kind of all rolls up into a formula of a lot of regret for a lot of people. So that's part of our mission. Let's try and address that.
I love that. So unusual subject matter.
Very, yes.
Well, unusual in terms of it's not unusual that it happens, but unusual that you've decided to build a business around it. So maybe a little bit of history as to how that came about.
Of course, yes. I mean, it is the opposite of unusual. It is entirely ubiquitous, but there's not a lot of innovation tackling this as a whole life stage. And I think arguably there's almost no use of software.
I can't imagine that there is at all.
So I never ever thought I would be doing this work. I am a career consultant. I set up and ran a number of consultancies here in Sydney. But I was always really interested in emerging disciplines. So I did a lot of work around purpose-led strategy, a lot of work around human-centered design, and a lot in adaptive leadership. Kind of brought those three things together and worked at the intersection of them. That was a lot of my consulting focus. And I was running one of those agencies with my first husband, Maro. Really busy time of life. We had 3 little kids, all under 7. And he had
3 under 7?
3 under 7.
Jeez.
Yeah, a lot happening. And he had a very sudden and aggressive cancer diagnosis.
It's awful.
Yeah. Really came from out of the blue. And he died 15 months later.
Goodness.
Yes, and that is never going to be an easy thing for anybody to go through. But after his death, I spent a lot of time thinking about the things that really should have been better.
I can imagine that it would almost haunt you at night to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about regret,
you
know, and I was deeply regretful for the way that played out for him, for me as his wife, for our kids, for our family. So I thought a lot about the things that we should have talked about that we just didn't know how to talk about, couldn't bring ourselves to talk about, the planning we should have done. He spent weeks and weeks and weeks in hospital.
I can imagine.
Away from us.
When it's that quite fast,
You know, lonely, having a bunch of treatments he should never have had. He died in intensive care, didn't even have a will in place. So then I found myself a single, self-employed mother of 3 children trying to navigate that mess.
How old were you then?
I was 36.
Yeah, that's a really hard time. There's a lot.
No, I wasn't. I was 38.
Nothing same. It doesn't really matter.
Late 30s.
I mean, late 30s is busy because the children are an enormous amount of time at that age as well.
My littlest wasn't quite 2.
Yeah, I mean, just the sheer. I mean, I've only got 2, but remember that time well. It was busy. I can't even imagine being 1 on your own. But 2, having to deal with the emotional turmoil that you and the children are going through at the same time. I guess there's some bonding in that and positives, of course, in everything, but you don't see that at the time. It would have been hard.
And you're quite fiercely protective of them. You know, you're trying to figure out what's the right amount of information for my kids to have and what's too much.
Well, at 2,
and that looked different for my 7-year-old daughter to my 2- and 4-year-old boys.
Yeah.
But it was a really difficult time of life, of course. But I spent a lot of time thinking about it and reflecting on it. And I did a program about 18 months after his death called Social Leadership Australia, which was a real catalyst for me in terms of some of the big important decisions that I wanted to make in the work I wanted to do. And I then was invited to join the board of a very little charity called Life Circle, who were doing really interesting work in this space, but had no scalability or sustainability in their model. So over time, I got involved in that organisation. I was eventually asked to take on the CEO role, and we really kind of rebuilt it from the ground up and figured out how to make that a national not-for-profit, with an ambition like Beyond Blue or Lifeline, the go-to. But as we did that, we quite quickly secured about $1 million B2B revenue. There were aged care providers, home care providers, big banks, health and life insurers who were really seeing value in the work of the not-for-profit. So it just gave me a signal to say, I think there's a bigger play here. I think there's something more tech-enabled and more commercial to look at, which was going to be unachievable as a not-for-profit.
Yes.
So about this time last year, we spun off a separate business. We were invited to join Techstars, which was just a brilliant catalyst at that time.
I know them well. They're lovely people. Yeah, I do. I know them well.
So my 20 minutes with Kirsten Hunter before we applied for that was the thing that really sealed the application for me. Because
she's a force of nature.
She really is.
She's coming on the show, I think, in a few weeks.
That'll
actually,
be so good. That will be so good.
I've shared the stage with her a couple of times. I like her. She's an impactful person. That is for sure.
She really is, and she has got the kind of commercial and purpose wiring. Really
she does.
Yeah, really well placed.
They're going through cohorts right now, I think.
They're about to announce, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So great catalyst in Techstars, really pushed myself and my co-founder, Tom Hull, to conceptualise what this could be, to start to do the early builds, to find our first customers. And here we are. We've just launched in the last couple of days.
So
it's pretty exciting.
Where did Tom come from? And
Tom,
because you are not a tech founder.
I'm not a tech founder.
So there's always, I always find someone who's not a tech founder to start a tech company. And I've seen a few. I've got a friend going through it now. I'm not sure if he's regretting it or not, but I think none of us have any idea of the complexities of. I'm not a tech person either.
No.
Is Tom tech?
No, Tom is far more tech than I am.
Yep.
But he still would never describe himself as a technologist.
Right. So that's a brave call.
Yeah, that's right. I've been talking to a lot of investors about that brave call. But we have a wonderful advisory CPTO in Paul Redfern, who is deeply experienced in health tech and fintech and really helps us bridge that gap for where we are today.
Is he full-time?
No, but hopefully he will be post-raise.
Post-raise.
So,
CPTO, for anyone who doesn't know, is Chief Product Technology Officer. It's not a term you hear a lot these days.
It's a magic.
Yeah, I've recruited some in the past. They're rare. But I haven't heard that term. We brought back some memories saying that. I haven't heard that term for years.
Yeah. So, you're right. I'm absolutely not a technology founder. I know enough about technology just to be a little bit dangerous. But I, obviously have kind of founded and led the strategic direction for the business.
Dangerous being the optimum word then.
Yeah.
How have you found the journey of, and I'm sure you've been involved and are learning a lot more about building a tech product. How have you found that? Because, and I want to ask this question because so many people right now, and particularly since COVID, are starting tech companies who are not tech founders, far more than we've ever seen before. In fact, if I look at the startups that we meet, I'm seeing a lot more non-tech founders than tech founders, which has never been that way, right? So there's this huge shift. So a lot of people will be sitting there watching this show going, I wonder how hard it is. So from your experience, and obviously it's shared experience with Tom and obviously your CPTO, but how have you found it? And what's probably been the best thing you've discovered and what's been the most terrifying thing you've discovered?
So I have found it absolutely a very steep learning curve, but incredibly liberating at the same time.
Interesting.
Because what we're trying to do, and particularly given the topic area that we're working in, is a very real balance of humanity and technology. So I don't think you could lead or build a company like this, a product like this, without that balance at its very essence. I don't think you'd take on a topic area like this, maybe unless you had a little bit more of that lived experience and, that kind of the grit, I guess, that we all kind of develop over the course of our life and the experiences we have. So I have found it challenging. If you'd have said to me 5 years ago, you'll found a tech company, I would have probably laughed out loud.
Yep.
But this is the only way that we can genuinely scale the kind of impact we want to have. And I think it's going to have a massive impact on the not-for-profit sector, which has been the legacy of this business, which we've kind of stepped right outside of. We just simply can't afford continued human service delivery for a lot of these really sticky, complex problems that have persisted.
It's really interesting to me particularly because we've had so many AI founders on recently, and obviously it's the talk of the town.
Yeah.
And AI is almost removing humanity, and you're bringing humanity and technology together, which I think is, it's not a conversation we've had in here for a while. It's almost been the other way. How can we? But you're quite right in that to have a real impact, you have to be using technology and you have to be using AI in whatever form that is. And it's a word that's bantered around without any care these days. But I think it's really interesting that you see that as bringing humanity and technology together. I haven't heard anyone say that, and I love that.
Good.
I just love that term.
Good.
You need to trademark that term.
Well, we're very purposeful and very thoughtful about it. So through the not-for-profit, we have built a national network of Violet guides.
Yep.
Really exceptional people. Think about the McGrath breast care nurses or the Macmillan nurses in the UK, people who deliver evidence-based support programs for anybody going through this. And they all have deep lived experience and they all have particular attributes that we look for and we train and support them. But you can't scale that.
No.
But we took just over 1,000 of the recordings and transcripts from that program delivery and then used that to build Violet in its digital companion mode.
Super cool.
So you're working with a guide. And of course, in any language, any time of day or night, I've been blown away by the sentiment analysis, the capability of the tool to understand your emotional readiness or your functional readiness to step into this work and be able to kind of adjust and accommodate to meet you where you are.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
what I love about it.
And so you've just launched, you said.
Yeah.
So how much pre-launch time was there? 2 years, was it? A year and a half?
Oh, a lot less than that. So we went into Techstars pre-product.
Right.
All the knowledge of the not-for-profit as really the engine for what we wanted to do, but
No, nothing.
hence why Kirsten Hunter is such a fantastic woman and and believer. We did our conceptual stuff, all of our kind of strategy and go-to-market work through Techstars and some prototypes.
Yep.
And it's really been the last 5 to 6 months that we've built this first, what we call minimum lovable product, because it's a little bit more than an MVP.
And so that's super quick.
Yeah.
And so the one thing you didn't say, and I'm going to go back to it, was what's the easiest part that you've discovered about building a tech business?
Oh, the iterative nature of it.
Yeah, okay. I can believe that.
Yeah.
It's quite refreshing. It's very structured in that way.
It's a bit hard for a perfectionist Capricorn.
Can't have perfectionists.
I've learnt to let that go,
No,
Steve.
not startup.
I've learnt to let it go.
No.
Again, 5 years ago, but and I think that's what I love, the fact that you just have to accept you are where you are today, and it's nowhere near the vision or ambition you have, but it's good enough, and you've got to get it in people's hands.
And customers expect it. They don't expect it to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming have you got an app yet, or you're going down that route, or
We
is
will
it?
be.
Yeah,
We will be.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, that's exciting. And then you're in the middle of a raise.
Yeah.
So before we get to the raise, if someone wants to come and see your product or look at your product, what is it? How do they find it? Is it in the App Store? Is it on the website? Is it through your LinkedIn?
So just go straight to meetviolet.ai.
Great title.
It's B2B SaaS product.
Yep.
We think the future for this product will be direct to consumer, but the world's not quite ready for that yet. So what we're doing is selling this subscription product to all the parts of the system where there's enormous cost.
Yeah.
And the consultant in me started to look at this and really think of that classic iceberg theory. And it's about $4 or $5 billion a year. It's around the amount of time people spend in hospital in the last 12 months of life.
Yeah.
A large part of that is unplanned, unwanted and unnecessary.
Awful.
You've only got to open any paper and see the crisis that our public health system is in. People in the last year of life do not want to be in hospital. It's our least preferred place to be and to die in that life stage. So hospitalisation is a big part of the cost, but also what we have coined as SADMIN, the SAD administration attached to this life stage. There is so much distress and disorganisation for people. You know what I'm talking about. It's all the kind of entry to aged care and home care. It's all of the financial and legal planning, wills, estate management,
I've been there.
probate.
It's depressing. There's nothing. You cannot make that a fun thing to do.
And it's actually very complex and costly for the businesses who provide
And
it
it's
as well.
paper-based. So much of it is paper-based still.
It is. And I remember still the amount of times I had to put my husband's death certificate on the counter in front of a stranger.
Yeah.
And then they suddenly realise what you've been through, and they look at you in a certain way, and it's a really high point of friction. So what we're building is a way to help people be much better planned and prepared, and actually have all of those documents in place in our secure platform, and then to actually link those up. So if you've got a bank account to close or a life insurance claim to process, we actually bridge over to the provider and make that quite seamless.
That's awesome. So who are your customers currently?
It's quite an interesting mix. So there's a lot of interest from aged care and home care providers.
There's a lot of that. I mean, that industry, we're doing a lot of recruitment in that space. It's exploding, unfortunately, because of
it's a really tough time for them. They've got incredible complexities with their workforce.
Oh my gosh, I have learned so
gaps.
much about the workforce side of it. We're recruiting for a particular company in Adelaide, and they were explaining to me, it's like, oh my goodness.
Really tough time.
It's awful.
So again, being able to bring products to those industries that really help upskill their staff and reduce OPEX for them is really important. But also the health insurers, the life insurers, the banks, the super funds, the law firms, the financial advisors, and the funeral providers.
Yes.
It's kind of our breadth of industry.
And are they keen? The response is keen. And I imagine it would be, right?
There is no product in this space. There's some great tech work being done in quite tight silos. So online wills is a great example.
Yep.
Fantastic products, but it's quite hard to sell that on its own. People are so distressed and distraught as they go through this. They don't wake up one day and go, what I need today is an online will.
People do that way before, not at the time you're talking about. So the reason those, and we've had some of those companies on the show, and we recruit with some of those companies, they are doing quite well, but they're not selling at the point you're talking about.
That's right.
And it's not what you want to do.
But we will also have a really high trust marketplace as part of this platform. So I agree with you, they're doing amazing work, really high value contribution, but we want to be able to kind of bring people to those products through their experience with Violet. So we want to be the bridge between all of that distress and overwhelm, fantastic products and services, and we can.
And so the idea is that as an individual, I go onto your platform and I can do it all really simply and easily. Ideally, that's the utopia.
Yeah. And in this world, we've got to be very singularly focused on who we're selling to first. We're taking this to market to support baby boomers who are caring for elderly parents.
Yep.
But over time, and Tom, my co-founder, talks about this all the time, we want this in the hands of 40-year-olds who are taking out their first life insurance policy, 30-year-olds who are signing on their first mortgage.
Yep.
That is part of the normalisation and the attitudinal shift over time.
Yeah, it's good. I love it. So tell me, did you ever see yourself sort of being a tech founder when you were consulting? And what do you think gave you the confidence to do that? Because there are a lot more people starting businesses and becoming entrepreneurs later in life.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, I've been doing this like pretty much my whole career, I always wonder whether there was always a hankering to do it, but they were caught up in life, as you do, in jobs and so forth. Or do you think something has happened or changed that maybe drove you to suddenly go, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and do that?
I think to answer that, I have to separate an entrepreneur from a tech entrepreneur.
Okay.
So I think I've always been wired entrepreneurially. My father certainly is, and I love that energy. I love building businesses and scaling.
And were they your businesses prior?
They were. Yeah.
So you definitely had that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that side of it. And I think if I was to go into a big system, I'd probably suffocate.
Yeah.
I would never be the BAU CEO that you would employ.
No.
But to move from an entrepreneur to a tech entrepreneur
it's
something
actually
I wouldn't have predicted.
I think it's a bigger leap than going and becoming an entrepreneur, because most entrepreneurs will take a leap into something that they know, right? Usually within their domain space, unless something has impacted them personally in a really profound way.
Yes.
So I think when something impacts them personally, they're just so driven, right? They just will do anything, right?
Yeah.
But then I think most entrepreneurs that sort of start businesses are in what they studied, trained, worked in, right? But then to go into tech, which if you haven't ever been in, is like, it's just so complicated. I think it's a bigger leap, and I think it's scary. I think it's a scarier leap because you're going into almost totally the unknown. Whereas at least when you're starting a business in your domain, you have the comfort of knowing you are an expert in that field, usually to some degree.
I love the unknown.
Well, this is why you're doing it.
I get supercharged by all of that unknownness, all that ambiguity. And I know that's not for everybody. What really drew me to become a tech founder was this very singular commitment to this problem space, which I am deeply, deeply committed to, and the very real frustration I could see around building a scalable, impactful solution. Technology is the only way to do that.
Yep, I agree.
For the time in which we live. So there you go. There's the answer.
You love the unknown.
I really do.
That's good. That's great. I think not a lot of people do. I mean, human beings, I find, I've studied a lot more human being psychology since I started doing this show because I just meet so many different people. And I've learned how much human beings hate uncertainty, but how much they also hate predictability. And everyone's just somewhere in the middle in varying degrees. And it's quite fascinating to sort of look at how people's behavior in normal life can almost give you an idea of how much uncertainty and how much predictability they like. This whole topic you could look at forever.
If this is a podcast of its own. I think a lot of it comes from your experiences. I dare say before going through that with my first husband, I would not have seen the world that way. But it has really changed the way that I live my life. It's changed the way that I make decisions. It's totally changed my appetite for risk.
Yep.
Because I think when you see how quickly things can change, you're much more inclined to be there and actually kind of grab it with both hands.
Take some action, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me about the raise. How's it going? So you've been going a few weeks already, right?
Yeah, a little bit longer than that.
It's a hard time to raise money at the moment in any business. It doesn't matter what it is.
I know. You wouldn't necessarily pick this time.
No, you would not. You'd pick 2 years ago where everybody got money.
Of course. And then you bring a product which is not for everybody. You know, it's a product that is it's new, it's being understood, it's confronting for some. And then you put yourself in front of that product as an older female founder. And there's not a lot of pattern matching.
Let's talk about this because the female founder thing, I'll tell you my opinions on this.
Please do.
I've had a couple of clients over the last 2-3 years who've asked me to go along to investor meetings, even though I don't work for them. I'm their recruiter, right? And they've asked me to go along because they said, I need a man in the room. I literally need a man in the room, which I find horrific and ridiculous. But then I think what's frustrating me even more is that for the last 12, 18 months, I can't open anything or look at any kind of page or LinkedIn or anything without seeing all this talk about female founders and how we're going to support them. And then every week I see the report come out that I get that shows me who got funded, and there's nearly always a zero next to the female founder section. So we've got this world where everybody's so supportive and everyone wants to change, but there's absolutely nothing happening in that space. It's still so bad. And I'm confused because everyone's saying that we're doing it, but no one actually is. So I'm interested to know what it's actually like out there right now.
It's really tough.
Yeah. And can you give me some examples of potentially, have you felt like you're not getting the meetings, or have you felt like the meetings have been more of a, let's do a meeting because it shows that we're meeting them and we can put it on the stats, or I don't know, give me some examples.
We've been getting the meetings.
Yeah, well, that's great.
Absolutely.
I mean, B2B SaaS helps. Like there's a lot of B2Cs in the female founder space, which is difficult.
There's an inherent generosity and interest in the investor landscape, the ecosystem. There's a desire to meet and to talk about.
So you think the interest is genuine?
I think it comes from a genuine place.
Okay.
What I have felt is that this I guess it's a bias. I guess it is a pattern matching exercise.
Do you think it's unconscious bias?
Yeah, I do think it's unconscious bias.
Okay, well that's one kind of positive if you can draw something from it.
I'm not meaning to approach this with any finger of blame. I think it's just it's an unfortunate reality for the ecosystem. All of the data tells us that female founders should attract investment.
More so even,
and you'll have such a brilliant conversation with Kirsten around this because she will will bring so much depth to that. But the reality is it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, it's a shame. Okay. And who are you looking to? Are you hitting the VCs? Are you hitting angels? Are you open?
We've got our first couple of confirmed investors, and one of those is a VC, which is wonderful. So to close our round, we are really looking to talk to family offices, angels, and early stage VCs.
Yep.
So as I said to you just before we started filming, I've learned a lot in this grueling process. I think securing those first couple of investors is the hardest part. So I'm feeling really energised now about closing that round.
Because they always ask you who else you got, right?
Of course.
Of course, first question.
Yeah,
well, look, we have a huge audience of those investors in this show, so hopefully that will help. We'll try and get this episode out quicker than perhaps we might normally to see if we can help you close that round out. And I do wish you luck with it. And so that money is just going on, is it going on people? Is it going on tech? Is it going on marketing? Where is it sort
It's product and growth.
Yeah, okay.
Essentially, a little bit of ops, but 70% product. We've got so much that we want to do in this space. We've got some really strategic goals to go after very, very quickly, and we know what we want to put in place to go after them. Incredible businesses and brands already signed and in negotiation at the moment to keep moving forward with us. And then growth, just
and no competition. Anyone out there? There's no competition. Does everybody hear that?
There's some interesting stuff happening in the States.
I was going to ask you, that was my next question, what was happening
overseas? Yeah, of course, we've been following this for the last few years. Interesting activity post-death.
Really?
In the how to tidy up someone's estate post-death. Now, I think it's remarkable work. I don't think it achieves the full impact.
Yeah.
I think we have to be preventative in the way that we think about this. And again, Tom, my very sage co-founder, would say, you can't be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. You've got to get to the top and actually
prevention
do
rather
the
than
work
cure.
there. Yeah.
Is it in anything?
Yeah.
I've seen some startups that are more around creating memories, like Instagrams and that kind of stuff. There's quite a lot of that, which I think is great. I think that's a really nice thing to do. The video memories, it's an awesome thing to do. But I've not seen anything like yours at all. That's why we want you on the show.
Thank you. And again, we want those products in our marketplace.
Absolutely.
Because it's such an important part. And I think as a society, we used to turn to our doctor or our priest to make sense of this life stage, and that's resulted in things being very medicalised. And you cannot argue that our relationship with religion looks very, very different in recent decades. So we need a new model, and we need ways to create new, really meaningful rituals.
Yeah,
I deeply believe in that. So that's absolutely part of our future stretch and goal as well.
So do you see this as a kind of ritual?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do.
Do you see it as something that, I guess, in fact, I'll let you put it, you tell me in your words rather than me use mine. How would you describe it as to someone if, as an end user, I know you're selling B2B now, but if someone was to say to you, what do I get out of this? What is it how would you describe that to them?
So you get a deeply supportive and personalised experience. You get a Violet guide in your pocket, essentially. But what we want to do is to help many, many more people have the experience they want and deserve. And that's not happening enough today.
Yeah.
And we want their families and their loved ones to have much more resilience and more relief and fewer regrets.
So it's really for everyone. It's for the individual going through that process and for all of their family and extended.
And the data says up to 9 people are bereaved for every death.
Yeah.
So there's 1.6 million Australians just in our tiny little corner of the globe, 5 million baby boomers who need this product in their hands. And of course, you know what that extrapolation looks like in the US or the UK. It's a big untapped market.
I mean, my parents were in the UK, and obviously the problems there in terms of hospital and hospices the population is so enormous for such a tiny place. It's
the
crazy.
The ageing population means that the number of deaths each year will double just in 15 years.
Gosh, that's enormous.
It's the second highest priority for the NHS.
The NHS is not in a good place.
No. And we've just put some new research out just here that says 1 in 4 beds in our public hospital system is an elderly, frail person in the last months of their life.
Will you go overseas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And is there anything post-death? Does it continue on, or how does it sort of work from there?
So it absolutely does continue on, and this is part of both the way that we want to keep people in the Violet ecosystem. You can imagine, Steve, going through this and having a really high trust experience with Violet, and maybe Violet, voice to voice has helped you, has coached you and moderated really important conversations with you and your family, has captured those conversations, helped you do care planning, done all of your financial and legal work with you. But in talking to your mum or your dad, very precious memories are stored in those conversations. So how we could then serve that up to you over time on important dates and anniversaries to memorialise those people, that's the kind of emotional ritual side of it. But from a practical, functional side of it, that SADMIN piece that I talked about, there's so much work to be done there.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us. I think it's fascinating. I wish you all the best. I really do.
Thank you.
I think it's an amazing concept. And I think, yeah, you're right. It's so important. And I mean, gosh, I mean, not to be commercial about it, but the timing is very needed, I think, is probably the right word.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that deserves to be solved.
And it has to be commercial to be able to scale and solve more people. And I think people need to remember that, which is why non-for-profit doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, my pleasure to have you on. I wish you all the best with your raise. I hope that our show helps complete that for you.
Brilliant timing. Thank you.
No. And when you have your next round or iteration of major product upgrades, we'll perhaps get you back on.
Oh, that's amazing. Thanks, Steve.
My pleasure. Thanks for watching today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. What a fascinating episode. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.